The most feared warrior in the spiral arm had come to prove a point and crush a few skulls along the way. Commander Draxil Vorn stepped off the docking ramp of the Celestara with the confident stride of someone who had never tasted defeat. His segmented arms swung with deliberate precision, each motion a showcase of the sheer power coiled beneath his obsidian carapace. The artificial gravity of Helix Station felt like a joke, barely a whisper compared to the bone-crushing pressure of Vorn's homeworld, Dravkar, where a weaker species wouldn't last 5 heartbeats. His mandibles flexed as he surveyed the busy training concourse of the Galactic Alliance Combat Academy. "This is the great proving ground?" he scoffed aloud, his voice thick with sarcasm. Pathetic. Cadets of every known species bustled through the atrium. Wispy oroliths hovered with shimmering wings, their bodies composed of barely tangible plasma. A trio of Durnok brutes rumbled past like sentient boulders, their gravel skin leaving dents in the flooring. Amphibious Valerians sloshed about in their brine tanks, issuing wet gurgles of speech. But it was the humans who made Draxil's chitin bristle with disdain. Pink, soft, vulnerable. They looked like overripe fruit waiting to be crushed. No talons, no fangs. No armor to speak of. Their bones, by comparison, might as well have been twigs. Yet they walked with infuriating boldness, as if they didn't realize just how breakable they truly were. "They've crawled from their mudball and pretend to belong," Draxil muttered, his compound eyes tracking a group of them with disgust. A voice hissed beside him, breaking his reverie. "Commander Vorn, I presume?" He turned to face the instructor, a serpentine Zalari named Instructor Nyrus. Her iridescent scales rippled from blue to green, a nervous tick among her kind. "Correct," Draxil said, offering a traditional Dravkar battle salute with 2 of his 4 arms. "I trust my reputation precedes me." "Oh yes," she replied, her voice tight. "Champion of the Obsidian Pits. Over 200 unbroken victories. The Academy is honored." Draxil let his thorax swell with pride. "I've come to show these fledglings what real discipline looks like. Especially the humans. I hear they've been problematic." Neris hesitated. Her scales darkened to a cautious violet. "Commander, perhaps you should review their file more thoroughly." "Humans are not as weak," Draxil cut in, sneering. "I've read enough. No fangs, no natural armor, weak musculature. Their planet's barely a death world. I could crush one with my mandibles before they even blink." The instructor coiled her lower half uneasily. "Commander, you really should." "Save your breath," Draxil snapped. "I'll deal with them personally. Tomorrow morning, one-on-one combat. Let the rest watch and learn what happens when prey tries to mimic predators." They entered the main training hall, a massive arena framed in steel and reinforced alloy. Dozens of cadets were already sparring, overseen by instructors barking commands. The clang of strikes, the grunts of effort, the crackle of deflective shields, it was a symphony of violence. That's when Draxil saw her. Human, clearly. Pale skin, lean frame, absurd rope-like hair tied back behind her neck. Yet something about her made him pause. She moved with uncanny grace, flowing through her combat routine like water poured into a blade's mold. Each strike was purposeful, clean, and eerily efficient. The training dummy she attacked crumpled under her calculated assault. "Who is that one?" Draxil asked, gesturing with one arm. Neris flinched. "Cadet Lyra Monroe. She's exceptional." "She'll do," Draxil said. "I want her in the ring tomorrow. First light." "Commander, I must object." "Noted," he growled, and disregarded. As Lyra finished her sequence, she glanced toward the observation platform. Her eyes met Draxil's, calm, cold, unblinking. No challenge in them, just a quiet, unsettling stillness. For the first time in decades, Draxil felt something unfamiliar scrape along his exoskeleton. Unease. He shoved it away. "Prepare the ring," he said. "Tomorrow, I remind these apes what true combat looks like." The next morning, the arena was packed. Cadets from every species ringed the platform, whispering, betting, recording. At the center stood Lyra, dressed in the standard light armor of her class. No weapons, just gloves, no fear. Draxil stepped in opposite her, towering, gleaming, deadly. "I will not harm you beyond repair," he said coldly, "but I will make you an example." Lyra raised one brow. "We'll see." The bell rang. He lunged. She was gone. His first strike hit nothing but air. The second was dodged with a sidestep so tight it brushed his carapace. Then came her fist, straight into the nerve cluster behind his midplate. The impact short-circuited 2 limbs. He reeled. The crowd gasped. Draxel roared and charged again, but Lyra danced around him like starlight. She was fast, too fast. But more than that, she was calm, calculated. Her every movement was surgical, as though she'd already seen the entire fight before it happened. A knee to his jaw, an elbow to his thorax, a twist, a pivot, a drop. Draxel hit the mat with a crash that shook the viewing platforms. He tried to rise, then realized he couldn't feel his lower limbs. Instructor Nyrus moved in, silent and wide-eyed, as med drones began scanning Draxel's paralyzed body. Lyra stood over him, expression still unreadable. "Humans don't have armor," she said softly, "because we learned to fight smarter, not harder." Draxel stared up at her, the truth cutting deeper than any blow. He had come to teach the humans about war. Instead, he had learned what terror truly looked like, and it came in a 5'8" frame with a pulse. Cadet Monroe and the monster from Dravkar. The galaxy's fiercest warrior arrived at the Academy not to learn, but to dominate. Commander Draxel Vorn, living legend of the Krexari death arenas, strode into Helix Station with his armored limbs swinging like the blades of a war machine. His exoskeleton gleamed obsidian under the station's artificial lights, and his presence carried the weight of over 200 blood-soaked victories. Helix Academy's instructors knew what his arrival meant. Trouble, pride, and if no one stopped him, disaster. But no one could stop him. Not yet. The next morning, the air in Training Bay 7 was thick with tension. A silent warning hung in the recycled oxygen like the smell of ozone before a storm. Instructors exchanged grim looks. Commander Vorn stood tall in the center of the combat ring, his forearms extended as if embracing the moment. "Attention, cadets," his voice thundered. "Today, you will witness real combat. Not your padded drills or simulated skirmishes. Today, you learn what discipline looks like." A semicircle of cadets gathered, Durnox, Shardans, Orliths, Voltari, and humans. Each species held its breath. Even the notoriously unflappable Toganans were visibly tense. Vorn turned to a reinforced combat dummy and struck it with a single open palm blow. The impact echoed like a detonation. The dummy bent nearly in half before rebounding into position. "This," Vorn said, "is what power looks like." He scanned the crowd. "Now, who wishes to volunteer?" Silence. He let it hang, savoring the discomfort. "No one?" he mocked. "How disappointing." "Very well, I will choose." His multifaceted eyes locked onto the back row, the cluster of humans. "You," he said, pointing one clawed digit. The small one with the dark hair. "Step forward." Lyra Monroe tilted her head, blinked once, and casually made her way into the ring. She moved like she was heading to a coffee break, not a public execution. "Name and homeworld for the record," Vorn demanded. "Lyra Monroe, Earth," she replied evenly. "Is this going to take long? I've got a graviton theory exam in an hour." A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the cadets. Vorn's antenna twitched with irritation. "Your academic schedule is irrelevant. Today you serve as a lesson in anatomy." He began circling her, towering, forearms wide, exoskeleton clicking. Lyra barely moved, save to check the time on her wrist. "Tell me, Monroe," he said, "what do you know of combat?" She shrugged. Enough, he sneered. "What combat training do your kind even have? Finger painting? Group hugs?" "The usual," she replied. "Hand-to-hand, survival drills, weapons training. Nothing fancy." From the observation deck above, Instructor Nyrus whispered something that sounded like a death rite. Other instructors had gathered too, some already turning away, as if they couldn't bear to watch what was coming. "Nothing fancy," Vorn echoed. "Of course, you humans are barely evolved rodents. No claws, no armor, no defenses. Your planet is a joke. How you ever crawled into the stars is a galactic mystery." "Okay," Lyra said. "Okay?" His voice pitched with disbelief. "Do you understand the gulf between us? I am a forged weapon. You are lunch with legs." "I understand," Lyra said, finally meeting his gaze. "You think I should be afraid of you?" "You should be afraid," he growled, dropping into a Krexari battle stance, low, wide, deadly. "I've broken species twice your size." She didn't flinch. She didn't even lift her hands. She just waited. "You're not even guarding." He lunged. What followed wasn't a fight. It was a correction. Lyra moved like wind wrapped around razors. Vorn's first strike missed by centimeters, and as he overextended, she stepped in, pivoted, packed, and landed a strike to the base of his second shoulder joint. The arm went limp. Vorn staggered. He turned, furious, but Lyra was already gone, ducking under his next blow and slamming her elbow into his thoracic nerve bundle. 2 more limbs dropped. He fell to one knee. The crowd gasped. A crystalline Chardon fainted. Vorn tried to roar, but Lyra was behind him again, spinning, driving her palm into the center of his back. His exoskeleton cracked like old armor. Then, she whispered, "I studied your technique last night. Very predictable." He collapsed, gasping, limbs spasming. His pride shattered even more than his nerves. Instructor Neris rushed the platform as med drones swarmed. Lyra stepped back, rolling her shoulders like she'd just finished a light workout. As the silence settled, broken only by the drone's diagnostics, she looked toward the assembled cadets. "Next time," she said calmly, "maybe pick on someone your own size." She turned and walked off the platform, checking her wrist. Still on time for the exam.
Commander Draxel Vorn's exoskeleton darkened, the physical manifestation of his mounting anger, but Cadet Lyra Monroe stood unwavering. "I've already disabled you 3 times, she said calmly. "Would have done more if I were attacking instead of demonstrating, but apparently you need lessons in patience, rookie." Vorn's voice rose to a near roar. "When I do attack, it will be swift, precise, and educational. The others will learn what real combat looks like when technique shatters amateur flailing." In the crowd, human cadet Marcus Chen leaned over to whisper to his friend Alina Rodriguez. "Should we warn him?" Alina shook her head slowly. "Too late now. Besides, he won't hear a word we say." Vorn closed the gap, looming so large that Lyra had to tilt her head up to meet his many-eyed glare. "Any last words, human, before your lesson begins?" His voice dropped to a menacing growl. Lyra glanced briefly at her chronometer. "Yeah, this better be quick. I really have that exam." What followed would echo throughout the galaxy's military academies for decades, not for its complexity, but for its brutal simplicity. Vorn, now thoroughly bruised in ego by Lyra's casual indifference, decided to escalate. "Words clearly don't reach your thick skull. Let me show you." He raised his primary right claw, the very one that had shattered the practice dummy moments ago, and aimed it squarely at Lyra's face. "This will be a gentle correction, just enough to get your attention." The strike came fast, textbook Krexari precision, meant to be firm but non-lethal, like a harsh scolding for an unruly apprentice. The sharp smack of armored palm against human nose echoed through the chamber. Then blood erupted in a crimson spray, bright and vivid against the pristine floor. Lyra's head snapped back, droplets splattering like abstract art. The cadets gasped. Several sensitive species staggered back, faces pale with shock. Blixstun, a young Voltari, whimpered softly. Vorn withdrew his claw, inspecting it with his taste. "Human blood is disturbingly sticky compared to proper Ikami," he remarked, satisfied. "A perfect demonstration of superior technique breaking inferior anatomy. Notice how little force it took." Lyra remained motionless. No stumble, no cry, no touch to the injury. She stood statue still, eyes locking with his. Only now those dark eyes held something different. An icy chill swept through the training bay. Some cadets took involuntary steps back, unable to explain why. "Interesting," Lyra said quietly, voice nasal from the bleeding nose. "Where I come from, there's an old saying." Vorn's compound eyes narrowed, searching for fear or pain. Instead, he found something that made his carapace tingle uneasily. "And what saying is that, human?" "Never hit someone unless you're ready to be hit back." She spoke as casually as if discussing the weather. Blood dripped steadily, yet she made no move to wipe it away. From the observation deck, Instructor Coleman, a grizzled Centurion veteran, leaned in, alarm in her eyes. "By the 7 moons, look at her pupils." Threshnak's scales shifted to a stark white, an unheard of hue. "Commander Vorn," Threshnak's voice cracked with urgency. "Sir, I think we should." Vorn snapped, eyes locked on Lyra. Something was changing. Her posture, subtle but definite. Her breathing deepened, measured. "You seem upset, human," he mocked, trying to reclaim his dominance. "Did my gentle tap hurt more than expected?" "Oh, it didn't hurt at all," Lyra replied with unsettling calm. "And that might be the most terrifying thing I've said today." "I was just wondering something," she added. "Wondering what? How long this will take?" Vorn's antenna twitched nervously. Lyra's tone remained light, almost friendly. "When humans get really hurt, our bodies release chemicals, adrenaline, noradrenaline, cortisol, evolutionary survival tools from a world that really wants to kill us." She glanced down at the dried blood on her uniform as if noticing it for the first time. These chemicals take about 30 seconds to fully kick in. It takes 30 seconds for a human brain to switch from civilized to apex predator. A cold dread snaked up Vorn's spine. What are you saying, human? I'm saying you have about 25 seconds to apologize and walk away. Lyra smiled softly, like someone giving directions to a lost tourist. Because in 25 seconds, I'm no longer Cadet Lyra Monroe. Her words weren't a question but a warning. No, Commander, I'm giving you a chance. She checked her chronometer again. Her hands were steady, immovable. 20 seconds. A heavy silence blanketed the bay. Even the Talgon cadets, notorious for their thirst for battle, backed away. The other humans shifted to the edge of the observation deck, faces tense with anticipation. Not fear. This is ridiculous, Vorn barked, voice cracking. You're a soft, weak human from a backwater world. I am a warrior forged in the crucible of war. You cannot. 15 seconds, Lyra interrupted, voice calm. Vorn's fists clenched. His pride had already suffered at her casual dismissal. Now it felt like a challenge. You think your primitive biology intimidates me? That some adrenaline rush makes you dangerous? 10 seconds. I've broken enemies twice your size, killed beasts that would hunt your entire species for sport. 5. The entire bay held its breath. 4. Vorn's compound eyes fixed on her face, searching for the aggression he expected, the attack he was ready to counter. 3. Her expression remained unreadable, as if counting down to a birthday party. 2. Vorn shifted his weight, ready to unleash the strike that would prove why Krexari warriors ruled the galaxy. And then, Lyra Monroe ceased to be a cadet. She became something else entirely. What unfolded next lasted barely 3 seconds. Those 3 seconds would be replayed endlessly on security feeds, analyzed frame by combat specialists, and etched into every xenobiology textbook written for the next 100 years. But to the witnesses in real time, it looked like sheer magic. Lyra moved. No wind-up, no warning, no battle cry or dramatic pose. One moment, she stood frozen, blood streaked down her face. The next, she was somewhere else, doing something that defied all laws of physics. Commander Draxel Vorn's compound eyes, designed to track dozens of rapid movements simultaneously, lost her entirely. She had been 3 feet in front of him. Now, she was beside him, just to his right. Her small human hand gripped his primary arm just above the elbow. "How did you?" he began, but the sound was cut off. A sharp, final crack echoed through the chamber. Not a branch in the wind, but Vorn's arm snapping under the sudden, effortless torque Lyra applied, as casually as twisting open a stubborn jar lid. The scream that erupted from Vorn was unlike anything heard in the Academy before. It began as a piercing whistle, escalated to something like a steam engine under pressure, then dissolved into frantic clicks and chittering. Krexari curses or prayers, no one could tell. His primary right arm, the one that had smashed the dummy and broken Lyra's nose, hung at a grotesque angle. The chitinous plates that served as his natural armor cracked in jagged spiderweb fractures. A thick, greenish fluid, the equivalent of blood, oozed from the breaks. Lyra released him and wiped her hand on her uniform as if brushing off dirt. "There," she said with casual finality. "Now we're even." Vorn collapsed to his knees, cradling his shattered limb against his chest. His remaining limbs trembled as shock settled in. Those compound eyes that once burned with confidence darted wildly, seeking escape. "Impossible," he whispered through gritted mandibles. "Impossible! Impossible! Impossible!" The cadets' reactions were immediate and primal. The Voltari students took to the air, their feathery limbs carrying them to safety in the upper corners, huddling like terrified birds. The fierce Togon, despite their thick hides and aggressive nature, stumbled back in frantic retreat. Even the crystalline Chardon and dignified Chardon scrambled towards the exits, their chimes ringing with panic. "Medical team to Training Bay 7. Emergency medical team to Training Bay 7, blared the facility's comm system. But no one was looking at Vorn anymore. Every pair of eyes was fixed on Lyra, who had returned to her original spot and was now casually checking her chronometer. 12:37, she announced to no one in particular. Still time to grab lunch before that exam. From the observation deck, Threshnak finally found his voice. "Monroe, report to medical for evaluation." "I'm fine," Lyra called back, dabbing her nose with a cloth that seemed to appear from nowhere. "Just a bloody nose. I've had worse sneezing too hard. That's not what concerns us, murmured Instructor Coleman. Despite her voice carrying clearly across the silent bay, the medical team arrived with practiced efficiency. A diverse group of healers, each expert in different alien anatomies, quickly surrounded Vorn. Lead medic Sinindar, a tall, graceful being with 6 deft hands, took one look at the shattered arm and barked orders. Bone stabilizer, neural suppressor, full spectrum scanner, now! This isn't just a break, she said grimly. It's complete structural failure. As they stabilized the fallen commander and lifted him onto an anti-grav stretcher, Vorn's eyes never left Lyra. Pain, confusion, and something like grudging respect flickered in his gaze. How? He whispered hoarsely. How is this possible? You're so small, so fragile. Lyra met his gaze steadily. Commander, she said kindly, can I give you some advice? He nodded weakly. Next time you want to demonstrate superior technique, maybe don't pick the species that evolved by fighting everything on their planet and winning. She smiled, the same warm, unshaken expression she'd worn throughout. Earth didn't make us soft, it made us survivors. As the medical team wheeled Vorn out, his voice echoed faintly down the corridor. Impossible. 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 The other cadets gave Lyra a wide berth as she gathered her gear and headed for the exit. The human students, however, were unfazed. Some even looked a little disappointed. That's it? Alina Rodriguez whispered to Marcus Chen as they followed. I thought he'd last longer, Alina said. Marcus shook his head. You could see it in her eyes the moment he hit her. Classic Deathworld response. Poor guy never stood a chance. As the training bay emptied, Threshnak remained on the observation deck, staring down at the blood drops glistening on the floor. His scales had cycled through every color imaginable during the ordeal, but now they settled on a deep, somber blue. Whatever this human was, she was no ordinary cadet. Threshnak stared down at the bloodstains still glistening on the floor, his scales cycling through so many colors he wasn't sure which one they'd finally settled on. Behind him, Instructor Calaman spoke quietly. I don't suppose anyone bothered to warn the commander about human grip strength? Threshnak let out a hiss that was half laugh, half growl. Or their bone density, reaction times, pain tolerance. Not to mention they're one of the few species that actually get stronger when they're hurt. They fell into a reflective silence, each digesting the lesson they just witnessed. Think he'll file a complaint? Calaman asked softly. Threshnak's scales deepened into a shade of purple, a sign of grim amusement. Against whom? The human who defended herself, or the instructor stupid enough to hit a Deathworlder in the first place? Below them, maintenance crews arrived to clean the blood and reset the equipment. By tomorrow, Training Bay 7 would look pristine again. But none of them would forget the hard truth. There's a difference between looking dangerous and actually being dangerous. 3 hours later, Commander Draxel Vorn lay in Medical Bay 2, staring at the biocast encasing his shattered right arm from shoulder to fingertips. The advanced polymer matrix was slowly encouraging his bones to heal, but it would take weeks, and the humiliation would last much longer. Painkillers had dulled the agony, but did nothing for his bruised pride. Every time he closed his compound eyes, he saw the 30-second countdown again. Lyra Monroe's calm, terrifying composure. Her impossible speed. The doors to the medical bay slid open, and Vorn winced as fresh pain shot through his arm from the movement. Station Commander Keth Moore entered, a massive Ursinian whose bear-like build and gentle manner made him popular with cadets. But today, there was no smile. Commander Vorn, Moore said, lowering himself into a chair that groaned under his weight, we need to talk. If this is about discipline for your teaching methods, I'm here because of this. Moore held up a data pad displaying an incident report. Do you know what happened to the last instructor who struck a human student? Vorn's antenna twitched weakly. I wasn't informed there was a previous incident. There wasn't, Moore said grimly. Because every other instructor smart enough to survive this academy knew better than to hit a Deathworlder. You're the first. The words hit harder than Lyra's counterstrike. But the classification files had described humans as mild. Low gravity, temperate, few predators. Did you read past the first page? Moore asked, already knowing the answer. Vorn's silence spoke volumes. Moore activated his datapad, and a holographic display filled the air above the bed. Let me educate you about humans, Commander. Earth's gravity is higher than average for inhabited worlds. Their atmosphere has more oxygen than most species can handle. And those predators you mentioned? The hologram shifted to images of massive predatory cats with razor claws, pack-hunting canines with bone-crushing jaws, venomous serpents lethal within minutes. These are their apex predators. Moore continued, but here's the kicker. Humans didn't just survive alongside them, they hunted them. For sport, survival became entertainment. Vorn stared at the images, horror dawning. They look so fragile, so soft. Appearances deceive, Moore said. The hologram changed to human anatomical scans. Their bones are incredibly dense. Their muscles generate tremendous force in short bursts. Their nervous systems are optimized for lightning-fast responses. When threatened, Moore said, their adrenal glands flood their bodies with chemicals that increase strength, speed, and pain tolerance to levels lethal for most species. The 30-second countdown, Vorn whispered, realization dawning. Exactly. You gave her time to fully activate her combat systems. Moore leaned forward, serious. You didn't just hit a student. You struck a species evolved specifically to kill things bigger and stronger than themselves. The medical bay was silent, except for the hum of the biocast's regeneration field. Vorn processed this new reality, his worldview fracturing and reshaping. The other instructors warned me, he said finally. They did. Threshnak filed 3 requests to delay your first session with human students. He wanted to prepare you better, and I ignored him. Vorn's voice carried new understanding. I thought they were just weak, primitive creatures. There's nothing primitive about breaking a Krexara warrior's arm barehanded. The humans call it hysterical strength, Moore said, but it's no hysteria. It's a calculated biological response to perceived threats. Vorn shifted, wincing. What happens now? Court-martial? Dismissal? Moore paused, checking his datapad. That depends. Cadet Monroe filed her report. And it's remarkably generous. Generous? She described the incident as a cultural misunderstanding around physical contact. Moore's lips twitched with something like a smile. She requested no disciplinary action, on condition you complete a mandatory xenobiology course focused on Deathworld species. She's protecting me? Vorn couldn't hide his surprise. After I struck her, broke her nose, humiliated her. That's another thing about humans, Moore said, rising. They're remarkably forgiving, provided you learn your lesson. Moore headed for the door. Vorn called weakly after him. What about my teaching assignment? Moore paused. You'll continue teaching, but with a small change. What kind? You'll teach human combat courses exclusively. Moore chuckled. The human students specifically requested you. They said your methods were educational. The doors slid shut, leaving Vorn alone with his thoughts and his broken arm. From somewhere deep in the academy, he could hear the hum of ongoing training. Cadets practicing, instructors teaching, the relentless pulse of preparation for the galaxy's dangers. And somewhere, Lyra Monroe was probably sitting her thermodynamics exam. Her broken nose, a minor inconvenience in her day. Tomorrow, she'd return to training, ready to become even deadlier. And when Vorn's arm healed, he'd be there to teach her. The irony was sharp. He'd spent his career believing strength came from size, armor, and natural weapons. Now, he knew. Sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones that don't look dangerous at all. Vorn's compound eyes drifted to the glowing biocast. For the first time since arriving at the academy, a soft clicking laugh escaped him. After all, he'd wanted to teach humans about real combat. He just hadn't expected to learn so much from them.